Welcome back to the Fuel Your Legacy podcast. Each week, we expose the faulty foundational mindsets of the past and rebuild a newer, stronger foundation essential in creating your meaningful legacy. We've got a lot of work to do, so let's get started. As much as you like this podcast, I'm certain that you're going to love the book that I just released on Amazon, Fuel Your Legacy, The 9 Pillars to Build a Meaningful Legacy. I wrote this to share with you the experiences that I had while I was identifying my identity, how I began to create my meaningful legacy, and how you can create yours. You're going to find this book on Kindle, Amazon, and as always on my website, samknickerbocker.com. Welcome back to the Fuel Your Legacy show. And today we have another fantastic guest. We met through a mutual friend, looking at some other potential business opportunities. And when I found out what she did, not just what she does for work, but like what she's done over the last 10, 15 years, I just thought I had to have her on here and hear her unique perspective. We've heard from other types of people that do her current career as far as franchise consulting in the past on the podcast. I think I've had a few guests there. But what's very unique about Teresa Nelson and what her story is going to entail is she actually lived it. She didn't just get into the business because it's a good business to be in, but she actually became a franchisee, successfully owned, ran, and exited the franchise that she had, and then she's moving on to helping other people repeat those same steps. So I'm super excited. I got tons and tons of questions for her about the process and what did she learn and all those wonderful things. But she is very passionate about what she's doing and excited to help you better understand from an insider's perspective both sides of the conversation, both the side where somebody's helping you to reach your goals, but also what does it look like once you've taken that step and moved into it. So super excited, Teresa. Thank you so much for taking the time. I know you're a little bit hesitant. Is it the right thing for me? Why would you want to interview me? Because your opinion's valuable and I think it's worth sharing. In fact, I think that about everybody who even listens to the podcast. I think you're worth being remembered. I think your story has value. And even if it's very similar, nobody else lived the same life. And so I'm excited to see and hear about the life you lived and how you got to where you are, where you came from, and where do you see yourself headed.
Okay.
So yeah, if you want to go for it and share with us some of your background. How did you originally get into your first franchise, and what led you to that being an option in business for you? And then why did you choose to move on and then ultimately do what you're doing now?
Okay. Well, thank you for having me, Sam. I'm really glad that we were introduced. We've got some good people, friends in common, and some similar interests. So I'm glad for that. So I grew up in a little bitty town in Wyoming. And when I was in 7th grade, I read a book called Inheritance by Judith Michael. And it was about a girl who inherits a hotel and all of the ins and outs of running that hotel. And it sounded so interesting to me. And for whatever reason, I just clicked on that. And from that moment forward, I always wanted to own my own business. So I went to college at the University of Wyoming on a full ride scholarship. Funny little side note, because I had a full ride scholarship for my undergrad degree, and I wanted to get my MBA, so to help prepare me better for running my own business. And so I had a job at the law school at the University of Wyoming. I started off as a part-time work study, and when I graduated with my undergrad degree, they hired me full-time as a faculty secretary. And then I worked my way up in a couple different positions until my final position. I was the director of alumni relations and development and career services. And when you work full-time for the University of Wyoming, you can take one class free every semester. So one class at a time, I got my MBA. It took me 5 years. But so I have the unique distinction of getting an undergrad degree and a graduate degree without paying any tuition. And so that's kind of a fun little bit of my background. And I'm also the only person in my family to go to college and to get a college degree. So that's also something I'm pretty proud of. But working at the University of Wyoming in a full-time position, you got really good benefits. And it was, even though it was always in the back of my mind that I want to own my own business someday, I knew I didn't want to stay in Laramie, and it's really hard to give up a good job with benefits. And so after I'd been in that position for a while, probably about 11 years or so, I found a similar position at Idaho State University in Pocatello, Idaho. And so picked up and moved. I was ready to leave Laramie, Wyoming, and ended up at the university here in Pocatello, Idaho. And same type of position, good job with benefits. And still in the back of my mind, I wanted my own business someday. So here comes 2009, and there was a massive financial meltdown, and the university eliminated a whole bunch of positions across campus, and mine was one of them. And so I thought, that's my sign. It's time to do my own thing. It's time to figure out, what business I want to run. But I was so clueless. I had no idea what I wanted. And so my first stop was the Small Business Development Center. And they helped me brainstorm all kinds of different ideas that I could do, whether I wanted to open a store, whether I wanted to get into consulting or counseling or something like that. But I wanted something that I could build and it not be completely dependent on me. If I were a counselor or consultant, which I am now, ironically, but, everything depends on me. If I'm not working, I'm not earning money. And I didn't like that idea. I wanted to build up something that could basically run by itself. And somehow the SBDC guy introduced me or brought up the concept of a franchise. And I always thought franchising equals McDonald's, equals way out of my budget. And he's said, no, there are plenty of franchises all across the spectrum for different financial investments. And I'm sure we can find something that fits what you're looking for. And so he introduced me to a franchise consultant. I didn't even know there was such a thing. And so she had me fill out this 8-page profile, who I am, what I like, what I don't, what I'm good at, what I'm not, my financial situation, my goals. And after a couple of conversations, she came back to me with 6 different business models that fit my personality, my goals, my interests. And one of them was senior care. And at first I'm like, oh my God, I can't do that. I don't know how to take care of people. I'm a business person. I don't know how to take care of people. And she's like, calm down. She said, you run the business and you hire good quality caregivers, and they are the ones that go out into the clients' homes and take care of your clients. And then, you run the business, and this is a business that you can build it up and hire eventually like an management team. And then I could step back and it would run without me, which is exactly what I was looking for. And so after doing some more research, I realized in my area, I had very little competition, and that business was booming. That industry was booming. So I went ahead and invested in a Home Helpers Home Care franchise, and I got started January 2010. And I ran that franchise for 13 years. I was one of the top franchise owners. I was in the Platinum Club. I was on the Community Services Council. I was in a growth group. I won the Marketing Excellence Award. I did pretty well and ran the company for 13 years. And then I had an offer last fall for one of the other franchise owners wanted to buy me out. And the timing was right. I had just recently gotten divorced. My kids one kid's out of the house, one's almost out of the house. So it was, my whole future is wide open. So the timing was just perfect. So I was able to exit this franchise that I built up for the last 13 years successfully and, have a little bit of a cushion. And one of the things I kept coming back to is how I got started on that business. And I would never, ever have been able to achieve my dreams if not for working with a franchise consultant, because she hit the nail on the head. She found exactly what I was looking for, even though when she first told me, I'm like, oh my God, no, I can't do that. She knew better than I what I would be good at. And so if not for her, I would not have had the successful business and achieved my dreams of business ownership and financial independence. So I recently got certified to be a franchise consultant on my own. And I'm so excited to be able to help other people get started on their dreams of business ownership and financial independence.
Fantastic. So thank you so much for sharing that journey and kind of the whole process. I just want to make sure I have some of these things that are pulled out so people can get access to them if they wanted to. So this book, Inheritance, Judith Michael, did I get that right?
It's just like a fiction. It's not a business book in any way, shape, or form. It's fiction.
Okay. So this is what's funny. And this, are you okay if I'm super direct? This I asked her in our first meeting. She's like, yeah, just tell it to me straight. So I'm going to tell it to you straight. Okay, Teresa? The best business books that I know are all storybooks. Mm-hmm. Do you think of like The Greatest Salesman in the World, Richest Man in Babylon, The Dream Giver? In these books, a lot of the best business leaders, they all spoke in parables or stories. So when you can pick up a book that is quote unquote fiction and it guides your life and you can learn great principles from it, then is there a difference between fiction and reality? Reality is what you believe it is. So I think it's probably the best business book that Teresa could have ever read in her life.
I mean, it definitely sparked the interest. I went back and I read it several times. I have it sitting on my bookshelf in there. After this, I might go read it again.
Hey, that's good. No, that's awesome. So yeah, it's interesting that that's so common. And I would just ask the listeners, 7th grade, how old are you? You're like 12 years old. What were you dreaming about when you were 12 that maybe you put on the back burner because somebody told you couldn't or shouldn't? Or, you didn't rediscover, not that you ever gave up on your dream per se, but you got sucked into corporate for how many years?
A lot.
Too many, right? Maybe.
Yeah. A lot.
A lot. Okay. So here's the thing.
For 15 years, from the time I started college till the time I started my business was about 15 years.
And that was an additional probably 10 years, maybe 6 years, depending on when you went to college. So, you may be 20 years from when you first said, hey, I want to do this. This is my dream to own a business. And you felt it in your soul. You had tingles all over your body and like, hey, I'm going to do this. And then we get conditioned out of our dreams and we get conditioned into fulfilling somebody else. And what's interesting, and some of the notes that I got here, is not only did you always want to be a business owner, so everything you were doing in college was to that end, right? Getting your MBA, doing the undergrads, all those things. But when you did get put in and kind of join the corporate, for lack of a better world, although some people would say that higher education's even another level past corporate as far as slavery goes. But you mentioned that your role there at the college was still a little bit of career counseling or helping other people.
Right.
Okay. What did you learn during that process that really prepared you for what you're doing now?
The biggest thing that prepared me is, if anybody's familiar with alumni relations and development, it's basically sales. You're building relationships and you're asking people for money. And that, in my experience, in everything I've seen and done over the years, the business owners that are the most successful are the ones that have really good sales experience, or at least they're not afraid to get out of their office or out of their business and go out and start making those connections and building those relationships, because people like to do business with people they know, like, and trust, right? And so you can't just hang up a shingle and hope that people come and support your business. They don't know you. They don't know anything about you. And so all of those years of working for the university, I developed my sales ability, my networking ability, my marketing ability, And all of those fed right into being a successful business owner, because I wasn't afraid day number one to walk out and start going to chamber meetings and Rotary meetings and give a presentation to the Zonta clubs. And I actually have given many, many presentations to the business classes up at the university. And I was able to just go cold calling, knocking on doors at doctor's offices and rehab clinics. And none of that intimidated me because I've been doing stuff like that for years. And in my experience, that's the number one skill I think that people need to be a successful business owner.
So let's talk about that, because I don't disagree with you. I think that I think it's applicable in more areas than just business. I think oftentimes when we're talking about business, we think, oh, sales is really important if you want to be a successful business owner. If you're in business, you have to know sales. Can you think of any activities that I have no idea about the home health care, but I have grandparents that have been in various forms of this healthcare where they need help doing stuff. And maybe I don't think I would be good in that industry, frankly. Like my patience is real low for repeating myself and doing stuff like that. So it's hard for me. It's like people that I love and I wish I could spend time with, once they like start losing their mind and I can't have a real conversation with them, then it's over. Right? For me, it's like, you're as good as gone. I love you, but like, when do we have the funeral type thing? And that maybe sounds heartless, but I don't think that they're really enjoying their life any either. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they're thrilled to be here in some other universe, but I think that everything in life is about sales. So what other areas of your life do you feel like, okay, yes, these are the sales skills, quote unquote, that I learned, but how do those apply to every area of life, whether it's parenting, relationships, legal battles, anything that you're doing? How does the skills of sales apply broad spectrum across the board?
Well, if you think about it, being good at sales is being good at persuading other people and convincing other people that they want what you're offering, right? So across the board, everything that you just said, parenting, you're negotiating with your kids, you're trying to convince them that your opinion is right and 8 o'clock is bedtime, you're selling them. And relationships and any kind of interpersonal communication with anybody, it's not necessarily just, let me sell you this knife set. It's convincing other people or persuading other people that, your opinion or your needs or your desires fit their bill and would, improve their lives as well.
Right. And I think that that's just something I really wanted to highlight, because sales is everything. And sometimes people say, oh, I don't want to be a salesman, or I don't think I'm a good salesman, or whatever. And they discount their skills. Literally everything you're doing is selling. Even if you're trying to sell me on the idea that you're not a good salesperson, you're trying to sell me on. Like, I'm not so ignorant that I think that that's not what's happening. Now, I may acquiesce and say, you know what? I don't want to put in the effort to convince you that you're actually good at sales, because sometimes a belief is more valuable than a skill. Right? I'd rather work with a bunch of people who have very little skills but high belief than somebody who has low belief but is highly skilled. Because somebody who's low belief, highly skilled isn't going to be consistent enough at applying their skills to make a dent.
Right.
So that's another thing that I want to talk about, because you get, well, first, did you grow up in Laramie?
No, I grew up in Lyman, Wyoming, a little bitty town in the bottom left-hand corner of Wyoming.
Oh, I was going to say, because I feel like one of my in-laws is from, I think he's from Laramie. So, but if you didn't grow up there, then you probably wouldn't know him. I wouldn't assume.
I mean, I ended up living there for like 15 years, but no.
Maybe, but I don't know that he lived there. I mean, his name's Cole Snyder, if you know who Cole Snyder is. No. But if that doesn't ring a bell, then I don't even know how big those towns are up there. Wyoming is a drive on I-80 through. That's all I do in Wyoming. I've been to Cheyenne once, where I dropped off my car and my wife and I drove all the way up to the Dakotas. And that was like maybe the most boring drive I've ever done. Like Sturgis. I mean, it's just, there's nothing up there, man. It's just, boring. But some people like it. Some people would rather live so far away from any other human that nobody ever wants to go out there.
Yeah.
Good for them. So let's talk about this, that in 20, I guess I was going to say 2009, but 2009, they cut your position. Talk to us about maybe the false perception that a corporate career is a stable income. Like, what's the value of being a business owner versus being self-employed or even being a corporate employee?
Right. I mean, exactly that. I just working for a university, I had done that for, 17 years at that point, and just assumed kind of a government job, right? That it was set and steady with nothing to worry about. And I was making enough money to pay my bills and stuff, but was never going to get rich. And it was definitely a surprise when I was one of the ones selected. We kind of heard rumors that there were going to be cuts. I didn't figure mine was one. And so when they told me that mine was one, it was, a shock at first, but then it was almost a sense of relief because I got a severance package and some time off to job search before my position was actually eliminated. And so during that time, I was able to do a lot of the background work. I think a lot of it comes down to risk taking. Some people really like that safety and security, even though it's not guaranteed. They feel like working for somebody else and getting a steady paycheck is better than risking it all and maybe losing. And so I feel like I'm more of a risk taker, and I was willing to take that risk and gamble on myself in hopes of, no, there were no hopes. I knew I was going to do it. And I just invested my entire retirement plan, cashed out my retirement plan, invested it in the business, and just was willing to take that risk because I believed in myself. And I knew that that would be a better lifestyle for me, a better income for me than continuing on the path that I was. But I don't know that I would have had the guts to quit. But, because you get sucked into that false belief that, something's better than nothing.
Yeah, and the social construct kind of holds you there. I'm just curious, like for me, and maybe I'm different than many people, I don't know, but from my perspective, I think the true risk is banking on somebody else over than yourself. Like, not just, I want to address this from a few different facets. One, I know what I can, like if I've built up my confidence, right? I'd rather work with somebody who's confident with low skill than high skill and low confidence, right? So if I'm confident that I know how I can go make money in any situation, then that's something that nobody can really take away from me. Like I know I can make money. My mind can make money. Now, if I'm brain dead, then I'm not even here. So then that's fine, whatever. But if I'm still, my mind is still awake, then I can make money. And because I know how to do that on on a lot of different levels. So I think that the income perspective, I think it's safer and less risky to bank on myself because I'm in then control of what I want to do. But here's the thing that I think a lot of people don't think about. And so I want your perspective here because you cashed out your retirement. Now knowing as a business owner, one, how much more profitable being a business owner can be, but two, also knowing after 17 years, 15 years, whatever, what you had gotten to in your retirement assets. If you had just continued down that path, knowing what you know about money and the inflation and everything that it costs, do you think you would have actually been able to retire with any real satisfactory life?
No.
If you would have kept that life. So that's the thing. That's a part of risk that I think people don't think about. They think it's a safer right now, but what you're really risking is that you don't get to retire. Like that's the gamble. People aren't thinking about that. That's the gamble. But when you go to accept a job working for somebody else at a not minimum, maybe you get paid great, but the corporation's job is not to help you retire. That is not their objective. They're built to keep you working as long as they can for as little amount of pay as they can impart to you. That's the business owner corporate job, which is not necessarily bad because you switched roles and you became a business owner. And I assume that was your objective to a degree as well, because you're trying to be profitable as a business owner, right? So I don't want this to come across like I'm accusing business owners for being selfish or whatever, right? I think they're doing what they got to do. But I'm curious from your perspective, like, talk us through that mindset shift, because once you did break free, I mean, you always wanted to be a business owner, but once you finally took the step and said, okay, I'm going to risk it all. I'm going to take all my retirement assets out. I'm going to go put it in here. What was the mindset shift that had to happen for you to then believe, because you went back into business ownership after you sold your business. So at some point there was a belief, I'm better off by myself than working for somebody else. Mm-hmm. So what was that mindset shift?
I've always been a type A personality. When I was a kid, my mom got me a pillow that said, "I'm not bossy, I just have better ideas." And I've always been a take charge, go-getter person. And so, I mean, there was a mental hurdle to get over, viewing what I thought was safe at that time to what actually was going to be safer and better for me. And I think a lot of people encounter that mental block that just, it feels safe over here because they're really not risking anything. But yeah, the amount of money that gets put into your retirement account working with somebody else, unless you make massive contributions to it yourself, which most people don't, versus taking out money and investing it in yourself, where you're in control and you can see the results of your efforts year after year after year, and see, your bank account grow, and just realize that amount of money that you started with, it's 10 times more now than it would have been staying where you were. And I think not everybody's made out to be a business owner, and not everybody's going to be successful. But if you have the right attitude and the right motivation, the right why, then it's easy to make it successful with, your drive and your skills. And especially if you have a good coach that can help you get started and help you avoid some of the pitfalls that I made a lot of mistakes. And I'd love to be able to help other people avoid those and, help them get profitable even faster.
Sure. And we're going to talk about some of those mistakes. But one of the things that you did that I wasn't aware of this until I watched the show Undercover Billionaire. But you said it just like, oh yeah, this is what I did. But I don't think a lot of people are aware that these places exist. And I don't know how many of them still exist versus don't. But the small business centers in like every major city, at least major city, but probably most cities, they have like centers that are, I think, government funded, that are like trying to encourage small business ownership and small business ownership from a government perspective is less than 500 employees. Like, that's most of America. There's a few major corporations that have more than 500, but most of America is small businesses, as defined by that Small Business of America of less than 500 employees. So they have these centers. Talk to us about what those centers are and like, what are the pros and cons of them?
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you brought that up, because I tell them all the time, if not for them, I would not have been where I, gotten to where I was. But the small business development centers are government funded, and they're usually associated with universities. And our SBDC here in Pocatello is on ISU's campus, and all of their services are free. So you can go in and talk to them about brainstorming at the beginning, like I did. I want a business, but I have no idea what I want to do. And we brainstormed all different kinds of things. And then they also had the connections to put me in touch with this franchise consultant. And then right out of the gate, payroll was something that was really intimidating to me. And in one of my networking groups, I met a guy that does payroll. And so I all of a sudden had my first employee, and realized I need to pay this person and didn't know how. So I went with this payroll company. Well, down the road, I was paying this payroll company enough in fees every month to fund another position. And so I went to the SBDC and said, I want to do my own payroll. Help me figure that out. And so they're like, well, call this person, call this person, call this person. And, a month later, I had payroll installed on my QuickBooks, got rid of the payroll company, hired me another office person to help me with it. And then for 10 or 12 of the 13 years that I was in business, I did my own payroll and was able to save a ton of money on those fees. And so the SBDC helped me figure that out. And then when social media was kind of hitting its stride, the SBDC director came to my office and we went through like my website and my Facebook, and she gave me all kinds of tips and ideas and strategies for how to make it work. And then I was struggling with some employees that were not getting along. Two of my key employees that I could not live without either of them were butting heads at every turn. And so they had one of their SBDC directors. She was actually over in Boise, which for people who don't know is about 3.5 hours from here. But she had her expertise was in personalities and negotiating. And she was able to step in and kind of mediate between my employees. We did it via Zoom and kind of tried to help them see each other's perspective and made our working environment a lot better. And so, I would highly recommend. They have expertise in every subject you can imagine, and everything they offer is free.
Yeah, it's like it's funny because I actually work with business coaches and branding experts and marketing, all these things. And in the coaching world, we all sell our services, and that it's not necessarily good or bad, but it is funny to me that there's completely free resources out there if you're willing to do the work. Now, the funny thing about it is more about human nature than about the resources. Most people feel like they need to pay attention. And so there's a whole economy that works off of the fact that you need to pay attention. But almost all of these things that she's mentioning, or that you would go to these, minus connections. I think connections is huge, but you can go on YouTube and find out a lot of this information. Like, it's not secret. The best of the best have put it up there for free to help the world because they want to help the world. And yet people would still rather go pay somebody rather than go watch a 30-minute YouTube video and do what it says to do. It's astounding, really, from that perspective. But let's get into more about when you finally chose your franchise. What were some of the things that? Because I know. Well, first, explain for everybody the process of even buying a franchise. Because I think that some people think, I don't want to commit too early. You literally you can't. It's against the law to commit too early to one. Like, explain that process. At least the highlights, if not in detail, of like, what does it look like if you wanted to court a or multiple franchises? What's the process before you're actually able to own one?
Well, so once my franchise consultant, she introduced me to 6 different franchise models. One was event planning, one was IT consulting, one was a tutoring thing, one was a virtual secretary, one was senior care. And like I said, I'm like, And so I actually went to what they call Discovery Day or Meet the Team Day, where you physically go to the corporate headquarters and then you can meet all of the people who work there and get a better feel for, is their culture what you're interested in. And so first the franchise consultant put me in touch with a representative from the franchises that I was interested in. I looked into the event planning one and the senior care one. The other ones weren't for me. And so but then I also vetted a couple different senior care options. Honestly, she did not refer me to the Home Helpers senior care. She referred me to a different one. And I did the Meet the Team Day at that company and was like, no way, they are not for me. They were not for me. But by then I was sold on the industry. So I started doing my own research, and I went and I actually investigated 6 total senior care companies before I landed on Home Helpers. And what sold me on Home Helpers was once I got to the Meet the Team Day and met the people that ran the place, and it just felt like a great family. They welcomed me with open arms. They were super, it's hard to explain, but once I got there, I knew that was the right one. And so after going to that Meet the Team Day, then you've got all of the paperwork and agreements and franchise disclosure documents that you have to go through. So it's really good to have an attorney on your side to help you review everything. And like, they're not going to adjust their documents for you, their contracts or their franchise disclosure documents. They're not going to make any changes for you. So if there's something that you don't like, that the attorney can maybe help you understand what it means or how it will impact you. But yeah, so anyway, you go through all of that paperwork, and then once you sign on the dotted line, you invest the initial franchise fee, which is different for every franchise. They're all across the board for different income levels. So you invest that franchise fee, then you go back to, depending on the franchise, mine went to an in-person training. It was like a week-long training where they teach you everything from HR, how to hire employees, how to onboard employees, how to do your marketing, how to hire your clients. They provide you with an operations manual, employee agreement. And that's one of the big benefits, I think, of franchising, is you don't have to create all of that stuff yourself. It's given to you. And so everybody's working off of a standard operations manual and standard agreements. And so you don't have to invent any of that stuff. But once you do your training, then you come home and start implementing everything that you learned. But most franchises also provide you with a franchise business coach from the corporate office that kind of holds your hands and walks you through everything step by step by step. I know ours has somebody, the onboarding process for new owners is a 2-year process. So they don't just send you home and say, good luck. They hold your hand, they walk you through step by step by step, everything you need. And then the other really important thing about franchising is the teamwork that you have from the other franchise owners. And I ended up creating a little group of other franchise owners that were in the top. They were all in the platinum group with me. And we just bonded together clear back at the beginning and became best friends. And they were my support system because I was doing this all on my own. I didn't have a partner. I didn't have a spouse involved. And so they became my team and my brainstorming group. And we helped each other through everything. Once the pandemic hit, we had Tuesday wine every Tuesday afternoon. We had somebody in like every time zone, but every Tuesday evening, we would all get on Zoom and just, commiserate and talk about ideas and solutions and problems that we were having. And so just that camaraderie you have with the other franchise owners, and they usually have conferences, periodically where you have a chance to meet the other franchise owners face to face. And that camaraderie with the other franchise owners is priceless. You don't get that if you just start a business on your own.
Right. No, and I thank you so much for sharing that, because I think that, and this is one of the main reasons I wanted to have you on, even though I've had other people on. You actually lived the franchisee experience, and every franchise is going to be a little different as far as what that looks like. You may choose a different franchise, and your experience may not be what her experience was moving into that, but they all have processes, procedures, everything in place. But your kind of insight as far as, hey, these are the things that you proactively went in to improve, not to change, but hey, how can we create these groups, do these things to make things better? And there's still some areas, even when you buy a franchise, where you're able to implement things that make it better, right? And that improve the situation. Some of them are on paper and become part of the official documents, and some of them are just like a culture, right? Are you a driver of the culture, or are you sitting around waiting for somebody else to create a culture around you? And that's a life concept. It's not just a business or a franchise concept. That's a life concept. Are you sitting around waiting for the culture of your life, of your faith, of your family, of all this to be built around you, and you're just going to go do whatever? Or are you proactively saying, hey, this is something I'm missing in my life culture. I'd like to bring some of that in. Now, the word culture is really interesting. I grew up in Idaho, and we would make our own yogurt. We had friends that had cows, they'd send us over their milk, and we would make our own yogurt. Like, where is this going? Okay. Well, you had to put in culture, and it's just called culture, into the milk so that it would harden up and gel properly, right? It had to be cultured. Same thing with your life. These are small things that we can add into our lives to create the mix and develop and become who we want to become. And that's incredible. The other thing I want to highlight here is when you got to the point where you were choosing out. I say choosing out as in somebody made you an offer, but sometimes people think that the only way to maybe get into a franchise is to go start the new part of the franchise rather than purchasing a franchise that's already up and running and you're just buying it. Now, if you're just buying it, do you still have to be considered a franchisee and go through all the franchising stuff? Or can you say, well, I'm just going to own the McDonald's. I don't need to, and I'm not going to be involved. I'm just going to be like a silent investor in this McDonald's? Or do you have to go through all of the McDonald's franchisee stuff to even purchase one that's already up and running? And I don't know the answer to this. I'm really curious.
If you are someone who, for example, the people who bought my business from me, they were already established franchise owners.
With that franchise?
With that franchise.
Right.
So they already own several other locations in Arkansas, of all places, but they really love vacationing in Yellowstone and Jackson and Park City. And so owning Pocatello, Idaho gives them an excuse to come visit. And so they don't have to do anything extra other than get the approval of the corporate office that it's okay for them to buy on another franchise. But if it were somebody like, after talking with you, Sam, you're like, hey, that sounds really interesting to me. I want to buy a home helpers franchise. And there's one already up and running in Mesa, where you're at. You would, yes, have to go through the whole process from the meet the team day to the training to all of the legal disclosures. You'd have to go through the whole process as if you were a new owner. And then, because they just want to make sure that you're a good fit for them. It's not just your decision. They need to know who you are and what you're all about and decide if they want to work with you also. So yeah, if you're brand new to the franchise or to the industry, you have to go through the whole process. But if you're already established, it's just kind of a matter of getting their approval.
And the thing is, if you already know you like the business, like I love you telling about more of why they wanted to buy that. In my mind, what went through my mind is, that was a leisure purchase then. They purchased that as a reason to have more tax write-offs so they could go travel for fun rather than, and call it a business expense rather than a personal expense, right? Which is fine. There's lots of reasons why you buy businesses, and not every business you buy is just because you're trying to make more money. Sometimes you buy businesses or real estate or other things for ulterior motives, and the business is what gives you that gateway. But I like that sometimes you don't have to always build a business to get into business ownership. And sometimes if you already have a business, it could be anything. It could be cleaning, it could be lawn mowing, whatever. A large part of business growth, rather than thinking, how can I hit more people? How can I market to more people? Sometimes the best time to, the other thing that you mentioned was you realize you were paying more money to your payroll, or at least the same amount of money to payroll for fees as you could hire a new employee. That same concept is still true. If you're saying, hey, I'm paying X amount of dollars for marketing and it's bringing in X amount of clients, do you want to keep paying for marketing to bring in X amount of clients? Or would you rather take that marketing budget and go purchase another company that already has clients? And maybe it's the same amount of money.
I did. Yes. I acquired several other home care businesses during my tenure. And that was, yeah, a really good investment. And exactly what you were saying, the amount of money you spend on marketing, then acquiring something else, then that was a really good way to grow and increase my revenue.
And for you, you don't have to tell me your specific situation as far as how you chose to sell your company. But in my experience on the financial side, a lot of business owners don't want a direct payout of the total value of their company because it complicates tax situations. And they would rather have like an owner finance type situation where you can buy somebody out over time of their business.
That's what we did.
Yeah, I mean, that would make the most sense in a lot of cases. But the benefit to that can be that you might think, well, I don't have $200,000 or $400,000 or $1 million to go buy this other company. You may not need that. Right. You may need goodwill, a relationship, a handshake, get it legalized, right? Get the paperwork in order. But a lot of times, if you could sell a company and have 10 years of guaranteed income, basically, and worst case scenario, the person who's buying your business fails, quote unquote, and if it drops below a certain amount of margins, then you take back ownership of the company. You don't lose too much, maybe lose some reputation in the marketplace until you can bring it back, but you can set all those parameters up. And so it might be easier to both buy and sell businesses than you think it is.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So that's fascinating. So what were some of the, and we're gonna wrap it up here, just two final questions. So what were maybe one or two of the biggest unexpected, I'm gonna call them failures or hurdles, like two things that you thought, oh, I got this down, I found out, I found everything I need to do, I went through the 2 years onboarding, everything, but then you just like, oh my gosh, nobody prepared me for this. This was not in the manual. You know, what are two or three things that you went through in the process of either franchise ownership that we could talk more broadly about, not just specifically about home healthcare, but more broad that other people might find themselves in and how to avoid those in the future?
Two come to mind. One is we were talking about marketing earlier. And I had actually signed up with an advertising agency here in town who helped me create like a radio commercial and a TV commercial. And we did some print advertising. But one of the things that I always did was anytime somebody called, a potential client called, I said, how did you hear about us? And so at the end of that year of working with that advertising agency, and it cost me a lot of money. At the end of the year, when I went through everything, the number of people that I got from that advertising campaign was like 3. I'm not joking. All of the other clients that I got were because of relationships that I had built. And so if I had just looked at the bottom line total, I would have assumed, oh my gosh, I worked with this advertising agency and my revenue doubled. And, you know, obviously it's due to that advertising agency. But because I tracked everything, I knew that that wasn't the case. So I was able to make changes to my advertising budget because that was like extraordinarily expensive. And that's like one of my biggest mistakes, I think, is trusting people and letting other people sell me, right? Talk me into things that you know they say should be good for my business. For sure, it's good for their business. And so I got burned multiple times, and that was going to be my second failure, is trusting employees. And it's unbelievable how many employees just kind of, you think they're good quality employees and then they steal from you, or they just abandon you in the middle of the night and don't ever show up to work again. And so that was a really hard lesson for me to learn at the beginning, was, trying to find the right employee, the right trustworthy employee, and then, developing your employee handbook and your policies and procedures as you go, that, try to prevent things that have happened to you.
Right. And some of those things may have been in the training. And I don't know, I'm sure there's levels that were in the training, the onboarding training. But again, these are just funny things about human nature. Until you have a name and a face to put to something, you might read it in a book and think, oh, that's not important, because it just doesn't like lodge in your mind as like, oh my gosh, this is crucial, until you get burned. And then you're like, oh, that's why that was in the book,
Right. So here's a perfect story, and then we can wrap it up. One of my clients, her daughter came to visit, and my caregiver was sleeping in the bed with the client. They both were just in bed, snoring up a storm. And so the daughter took a picture and sent us a picture of our caregiver sleeping. And so, of course, we fired the caregiver. Not okay. But then when she claimed unemployment, we actually lost, because nowhere in our employee handbook did it specifically say that a caregiver cannot sleep while they're at work. And I'm like, you shouldn't have to outline that, because we didn't, we had a whole bunch of things that they couldn't do, but nowhere in that list did we say you can't sleep with the client. And so she actually won her unemployment claim. And boy, how did we change our employee handbook that fast?
Right. But it's silly stuff like that. I mean, I do Airbnb, and I had some things that's like, hey, I'm not okay with this. It was definitely implied. It was broad strokes. But when it came down to the nitty gritty of like what was specifically expressly written on the advertisement, it wasn't in, like, it was in a bunch of other places, but because it wasn't in like the 4 inches you see on your cell phone screen when you're scheduling an Airbnb, then they're like, yeah, sorry, you lose. And it's like, what? This is insane. Anyways, so it's those little things that I think are really important. And guys, these are lessons. This is why I'm having you on here. Okay. Teresa, right. Thank you so much for coming on, because it's these little things. These are life lessons. Think about your relationship with your spouse or with your children or with your whoever it is. You might think and assume that like things are implied. Guys, nothing in life is implied anymore. Maybe it was 30, 40, 50 years ago. I would not go to the level of implication anymore. And what's hard, and this is just it's a changing thing of business landscape, but also relationship, everything. The dictionaries are primarily online, and the people in charge can change the definition of words from out from under you. And so not only do you have to do it right the first time, you also have to keep up on what current language is. Because let's say you do hypothetically have in your manuals that a man and a woman, and you're using gendered language in there. What happens when it comes to a court of law? And now we've assigned that this person doesn't even have a gender on all of their legal documents. They're not accounted for in your contracts anymore. This stuff is crazy, and it has to be like addressed. Having a good lawyer is probably your best investment.
I'll agree with that.
If you're in business.
I'll agree with that. And yeah, and honestly, that's what makes me unique as a franchise consultant and a business startup consultant, is I've been there, I've lived it. I can share my mistakes and help prevent people from making the same mistakes. I can save them time, I can save them money, because man, I made a lot.
Well, that's what you want. I would rather follow somebody who, made a lot of mistakes along the way and they came out victorious and they still won, than somebody who just had a smooth thing and never made a mistake. It's like, well, why would I follow you if you don't even know what mistake? I make mistakes every day. So if you don't know how to handle a mistake, that's not going to work very well. Well, Teresa, thank you so much for hopping on here. If we wanted to reach out to you, if somebody wanted to kind of hear more of your experience, get to know you, see if you're a good fit to help them reach their dreams and their goals, where would they get in touch with you at?
My company is called Envision Your Business. Our website is envisionyourbiz.com. And my email is tnelson@envisionyourbiz.com. And yeah, we're on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Teresa Nelson, come find me. I would love to help you. And my services are free also. I don't know if I included that at the beginning, but my services are 100% free for my clients.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's anyways, I love your business model and like the way that the franchise consultant industry works. And just reach out to her. Like the worst thing that could happen, like she reached out to Small Business Center and she just went through the process. The worst thing that could happen is like, oh, it's not really a fit for me. Okay, but at least you know. What if you got shocked though and found out that what you're already doing, what you already love doing, what you do, your hobbies or whatever, like your pastime, you could be like really thriving, making money doing it, but you just didn't know because nobody ever told you that it's a business that's so easily franchised. Anyways, absolutely incredible. I so appreciate you coming on here, and go check her out, and we'll talk to you guys next time on the Fuel Your Legacy show. Thanks for joining us. If what you heard today resonates with you, please like, comment, and share on social media. Tag me, and if you do give me a shout out, I'll give you a shout out on the next episode. Thanks to all of those who've left a review. It helps spread the message of what it takes to build a legacy that lasts. And we'll catch you next time on Fuel Your Legacy.